Well, football season is back, whether you like it or not.
For all you fantasy sports lovers, there's a new way to play your favorite game. Check it out.
Sports fans, hold on to your helmets because Yahoo is now making fantasy sports. They're taking it to the next level. And joining me now to tell us a little bit more is Yahoo sports fantasy expert, Andy Behrens. Welcome here to CT Style, Andy.
Oh, hey, thanks for having me, Ryan.
Absolutely. Now, before we talk fantasy sports, let's sort of talk about something here. A lot of our viewers, our female viewers, are sitting at home. You know, they're writing down their honey-do list, and they're thinking, this guy's talking more about fantasy sports. My husband spends enough time doing this. So what do you have to say to some of those wives out there?
Well, actually, the Yahoo Sports daily fantasy game is perfect if you're trying to transition your husband away from the season-long slog, right? Like, these are single-serving games, set a lineup daily. You only have to worry about it that day. You don't have to carry relationships with these players on into the future. You're not agonizing over it, you know, every day of the week, anything like that. It is a much better game if you are trying to schedule your husband's time.
Now, well, that's very important. Thank you for that tip there. Now, why do you think fantasy sports has become so big? It's such a huge niche market, but I mean, so many people play.
Yeah, you know, I always view fantasy sports as sort of the original social networks, right? Like, this was just a way to keep your college buddies together, to keep your high school buddies together, to bring together your department at work, right? Like, those are the networks that I've always been plugged into through fantasy. So I think it's just a natural. I mean, if we're all watching sports, we all share that interest. You know, it's just a great way to do it together. Compete with your friends, but in a lighthearted way. So
tell us a little bit about what Yahoo's doing. This is sort of a new way of playing fantasy sports.
Yeah, it's huge. So Yahoo Sports, incredibly excited about introducing a daily fantasy product. We have it going for Major League Baseball right now. And the easiest way to understand it is as a standard fantasy league, but over a different chunk of time, right? It's just one day. When we get into football season, you'll be able to play 1 week leagues, maybe a weekend league. But right now, this is just setting a fantasy team, you know, 2 pitchers, 8 position players. You accumulate points for what they do on the field, the good things they do on the field, and it only lasts 1 day. So it's a fantasy league that has a very short lifespan. You can win a little money, you can play for free, you can play with a huge group, or you can play head-to-head with just a friend. It is an absolutely great game, and it's a way to sort of get that thrill of assembling a team, assembling a fantasy roster. It's a way to do that every day.
And you talked about prizes. Can you tell us about some of the things that people can win by playing?
Right. So you can. We have games that are $1. We have games that are free. Games that are $2. And generally speaking, you're just competing to double your money, maybe in a 50-50 game or in a head-to-head game. You can also play in huge groups where there's real prize money out there. You know, $10,000, $50,000. Wow. People have all heard those advertisements, right? It's so there is that aspect to daily fantasy. Personally, I've found that the most profitable way to play the game and the most enjoyable way to play the game is just head-to-head against friends or in a relatively small group.
So you already have the baseball thing going, and you're going to be kicking off football season now. You were saying that now is really the time that a lot of people start getting into fantasy football.
Yeah, you know, training camps start to open, everybody gets that football buzz, everybody's excited for it again. This is exactly the time of year. It's kind of like spring training in baseball where it's so easy to convince yourself that your NFL team, your local NFL team has a shot. So a lot of optimism almost everywhere right now, maybe not so much in Cleveland, but everywhere else. So this is really when people get excited about it, and it's also when people start to maybe fade a little bit in their baseball fantasy league, right? You're coming out of the All-Star break, maybe you're in the bottom half, you start looking ahead to the football season.
And I was reading something about how people can pick players from their hometown. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, right. So in our daily game, you're able to assemble a fantasy roster. You know, it's 2 pitchers, it's 8 position players. You can put them together. I think it's up to 6 players from any single team. So you can just pick and choose favorite players from your local roster, opposing players that you're interested in. You know, I've always found the daily fantasy just a great way to complement your season-long fantasy portfolio, right? Because the player that you missed out on, maybe it's the hot prospect, maybe it's Max Scherzer, maybe you didn't draft enough shares of Max Scherzer this year, maybe you didn't get Kyle Schwarber. You just want to have a share of those players. This is an excellent way to do it.
Andy, of course, baseball, football, fantasy leagues coming up, but I really think we should work on a ping pong fantasy league. You think we can make that happen over at Yahoo?
You know, one thing that I've learned is that the hardcore ping pong players actually call it table tennis, and they go crazy if you call it ping pong. I do think we could make that happen.
I did not mean to offend any of those very official table tennis players. I do apologize for that. Andy, thank you so much for joining us here today on CT Style. And for more information on Yahoo Daily Sports Fantasy, visit sports.yahoo.com/dailyfantasy.